Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to you all from International Dyslexia Association Northern New England Alliance, serving Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. I'm Susan Horahan, current president of IDA-NNEA, and we're very excited to be sharing tonight's webinar with Faith Borkowsky, and she'll be speaking on Can You See Me? An action plan bringing about community change and improvement. So we're very excited to have Faith here with us tonight. As a branch, we're thrilled to provide these Read for Parents webinars every other month, which focus on different IDA fact sheets and areas of interest to families and educators. Helping us tonight is Chris Riley, and she'll be monitoring the chat and providing valuable links to discussion topics. Please feel free to add your questions in the chat for our question and answer time, which will be at the end. And we'll try to allow about 20 minutes for that. Certificates of attendance are not issued for Read for Parents sessions, but the video and the resources will be posted on the IDA-NNEA website within a week. The IDA-NNEA member benefits are listed here. It's a chance to reach out to other people with similar interests. We have journals and magazines that you can view, online store, conference recordings, all kinds of benefits for being an IDA member. As you can see here, there's a lot of different ways to become members, and surely there's something here that would fit your needs. So look them over and decide what would be best for you. As a branch, we do Read for Parents. We also do Wilson collaboration in February and December, and we have our annual conference, which we'll be talking more about at the end of this webinar, but that will be in the end of October. We have an annual Project Read webinar in the end of February, beginning of March, and we also put out newsletters, and we have scholarships to our different events. So it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our speaker for tonight. Faith Borkowsky is the founder of High Five Literacy and is a certified dyslexia practitioner with 35 years of experience in literacy instruction as a classroom teacher, reading and learning specialist, regional literacy coach, administrator, and tutor. Ms. Borkowsky provides professional development for teachers and school districts, as well as parent workshops, presentations, and private consultations on science-based literacy practices. She is the author of the award-winning book, Failing Students or Failing Schools, A Parent's Guide to Reading Instruction and Intervention, and the If Only I Would Have Known series of books conceived as a roadmap for literacy readiness and success for parents of young children. In 2021, Ms. Borkowsky was a finalist for the World Literacy Foundation Award for her significant contributions to literacy. With my pleasure to introduce you, and we'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Susan. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and then we'll get started. Okay. All set, you can see? Okay. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. So, my name is Faith Borkowsky, and I started off as a classroom teacher and eventually became a reading specialist. And we were chatting actually right before going into the webinar. And I mentioned that as a classroom teacher, I really was not prepared to teach reading. And I assumed by getting my master's degree that that would help me. And it really wasn't much different from my undergraduate training. And the reason I'm telling you this is I started off teaching in 1986, and here we are, 2023, and we're really still talking about the same things. And, we haven't really moved the needle very much. And I believe that, we're going about some of this in the wrong way. And I could share some of my experiences with you before we get into the PowerPoint, because I think it's important for you to understand why I kind of branched into working with parents and moved into this direction. I never thought that this would be what I would be doing, honestly. Once I started in the school system in New York City, and then I moved to Long Island, I really thought that that would be my focus. I would stay a teacher and I would be just working with children. But what I found was that even once we had this research, which really became well known in the 1990s, nothing much changed. I was part of Reading First, and I don't know if any of you heard of Reading First, but there was this movement to help low-performing school districts kind of embrace what was then called scientifically based reading research, SBRR. Now we call it the science of reading. But we've had this science around for many years. And when I became a regional reading coach for Reading First, I was young and naive. I really thought that just sharing the research with people would be enough. It would be enough that teachers would automatically embrace this and school districts would embrace it. And it was just a matter of learning what the research is and what it tells us we should be doing for children. Well, unfortunately, I was really disappointed, and Dr. Mark Seidenberg pointed out this disconnect between research and instructional practices. And I saw it with my own eyes that, just because we present facts, it doesn't mean that people are going to embrace it automatically, because it means it's a rejection of what they've been doing for years. And change is hard. And for some people, this is their identity. So it's like saying whatever you knew before, well, you know what, you really didn't get this right. And now it's time to change. And human nature is such that it doesn't happen easily. So, in learning about the research and going into many school districts and working with teachers and working with administrators, it's not enough just to share information and to present facts and to share research. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was a regional coach, I invited the ELA coordinator of one of the school districts that I was placed in to join me to see Anita Archer speak about explicit instruction. And the reason I asked this person to join me was she was in charge of the Reading First grant in this particular school district here on Long Island, where I live. And she was very attached to her balanced literacy practices. And even though, we had federal funds moving into schools and they were taking the money to change, they would do it partially. They wanted to hold on to practices, not let go, and still, get the funds to move their district ahead. And it was very hard for me as a coach to move the needle. At that time, it was really only low-performing school districts even interested in the science. We've had districts here on Long Island that still practice and still do today, the teacher's college reading and writing, guided reading type of instruction. And most people here, that's what they learned and that's what they were doing. And it wasn't enough just to share these practices. So I asked this ELA coordinator to come with me to listen to Anita Archer speak. And the two of us were sitting there and I saw her smiling and I'm thinking, oh, wow, this could be a breakthrough. And it looked like she was so excited about this. And I turned to her and I said, wow, so what'd you think? And she said to me, it's great. You know what? I feel confident that what we've been doing aligns with what I'm hearing. And I was stunned because here we are listening to the same presenter. And, what that told me was, perception is your reality. However you perceive something, that's your reality. And clearly we were in two different places. And, people will take this message in and they will take pieces of it. They'll cherry pick what aligns to what they believe in. And the other parts, they seem like they don't hear it. So, I would write my feelings down in a journal. And I've been doing this, like I said, since 1986. And I was always big on journaling. And when I looked back at my journal years and years later, I said, this would make a good book. And in 2016, I decided to start putting a book together, and it was published in 2017. And it was called then Reading Intervention Behind School Walls: Why Your Child Continues to Struggle. Eventually, that book became Failing Students or Failing Schools: A Parent's Guide to Reading Instruction and Intervention. And the reason I focused on parents, and I'm sure most of you listening are parents, is because I felt working outside the school system and making people aware of what's going on was a way to really push for change, because it could be so difficult when you're in the school, behind those school walls. It's very difficult. Now it's starting to definitely be a little bit different. I see it now. It is starting to change. But I just heard in the last couple of days that the quality, the National Center for Teacher Quality, came out with a report about teacher prep programs, and only 25% of universities are actually embracing this science and teaching all 5 components of reading. So they have the science. Clearly, these are universities. If anyone could get the research, it would be a university. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that we have to do this differently. So facts tell, but stories sell. All right. And that's what I'm going to be presenting to you today. Because after I came out with Failing Students or Failing Schools, can't tell you how many people I met. I never thought I would be somebody on social media. I never looked at myself as an author. I never looked at myself as a podcaster. And here I am doing a podcast called The Literacy View. I never looked at myself as an activist, and here I am. I really just thought I would be a teacher. But I was so emotionally engaged with this and felt the pain of parents trying to get instruction, the right instruction for their children, that my whole world was turned upside down with this. And so what I heard from parents after they read Failing Students of Failing Schools was that they wished they had known. And as you know, they would say to me, oh, if only I would have known. And that is the title of the book, right? And it's in quotes, taken from what parents would say to me, and that they wish they had read this book when their children were young. So I decided to do a book that was meant for parents of young children that would also speak to community members, such as librarians, such as preschool teachers and daycare workers and pediatricians. And so that parents could have this lingo, some basic lingo, to be able to have a conversation and not feel intimidated. Because I feel a lot of the books out there talk over parents rather than to parents. So I wanted to make it very simple and friendly. And this book, I chose to work with an illustrator, and it's with cute little animal pictures. And the reason I'm telling you this is that I felt that many of the parents out there are people who have trouble reading themselves. So you as a parent organization need to know that when you're giving out flyers and speaking to people, you might not be engaging all parents. You might just be working with highly educated parents who know where to look for information, and they're able to fight with a school district or hire advocates or hire attorneys. But there are so many parents out there who either don't have the means or just don't know. They trust the schools and they feel that the professionals know best. And, you know, they're not part of this conversation. They're not the people in Facebook groups and, you know, or not the Facebook groups like an IDA Facebook group. So what we have to do, I think, is we have to go into communities. So, and that's what I learned through being an administrator with the Parent-Child Home Program. We would go into homes. We would bring toys and books into homes. We would hire volunteers, people who actually live and care about the communities so that they are engaged. They're helping people who are their neighbors. And I think we have to look at this a little bit differently, that sometimes you cannot work through the school. You have to work around the school and get people to understand what's happening so that they could be able to ask the right questions. And this could facilitate some change. So I have a website that's going to be up at the end of this webinar, and it's called ifonlybooks.com. And on that website, of course, it talks about my book, but I also have a section on there called free resources. And one is a book discussion guide to be able to have a discussion with parents of young children and pediatricians and librarians and daycare workers and preschool teachers, so that you could use the book and you know, talk to people and have conversations around it. And one of my proudest moments was this book was used in Norristown, Pennsylvania, by a group of Black men who were part of a book discussion group facilitated by a man named Trey Hadrick. He calls himself Mr. Lit. And I tutored Trey Hadrick's son during COVID. And he was not getting what he needed through the school system. And he and I met through Twitter. And, he asked me if I could just listen to his son read. And at the time, he didn't even know about the science of reading. He had a passion for kids reading in his community, and he thought it was really about just access to books and building motivation to read books. And he didn't know. And his mom was a teacher, and his father was also an educator. And, he and I started talking. And once he started to see what I was able to do with his son, he wanted this for his community. So he ended up buying a whole bunch of my If Only I Would Have Known books. And he started a book group, and it was actually, I encouraged him to do that. He wanted to just start handing it out to people to get the message out. And I said, no, Trey, you should be a facilitator for this and have a discussion with people so you know if they're really understanding this. And he said, I can't do that. And I said, oh, yes, you can. And I said, I'll write the discussion questions for you. So that's on the website. And then he ended up having this discussion with other men, some of them educators. One of them was a barber in Norristown, Pennsylvania, who became one of the biggest advocates for this. And we started an initiative called Cutting Illiteracy, One Phoneme at a Time. And we had t-shirts, and there was a ribbon cutting ceremony there. And the barber ended up getting decodable books, and I ended up making connections with people I knew in the business, and they had decodable books sent there, phonic books sent books there, and Piper books sent books there, the IC Sam books, and we had a whole bunch of decodable books sent there. And then Trey put up this chart of, all the letter sound correspondences so that people could ask when they would walk into the barbershop and say, what's that? And they would see all these books there just to start a conversation going. And this all came from a book discussion of If Only I Would Have Known. But then I realized that, maybe we need to start somewhere else. And that's when I wrote, Can You See Me? And I decided to make that completely free. And that is on this website. I do not ask for your email address because I don't want it to be any barrier. I know sometimes people get discouraged. Oh, I don't want to give my email address. And then people are going to bother me. It's up there. And what I'm going to present to you tonight is a little bit about that, that workbook that's there. And the whole idea of that is to start an action plan, which would lead hopefully into a book discussion using the If Only I Would Have Known book. But this document, Can You See Me? And I'm going to share some of it with you soon, is really about, it's a fictional story. And that's what I do in If Only. It's fictional stories that try to get people emotionally involved in this rather than just present facts. I do it through stories because I really believe that the emotional component needs to be there. We need to reach people and pull at their heartstrings. Try to share these stories because we know that just an NRP, National Reading Panel report from 2000, didn't really do it. It was there, people read it, but not much change happened. We know that now, 23 years later. So we have to begin to showcase some of the damage that has been inflicted on children. And rather than, use one person, I decided to just do a fictional account based on stories I've heard. And I do it with little animal characters so that anyone could identify with this child or with this family. It doesn't matter if you're Black or brown, doesn't matter, because these reading problems really go across all demographics, right? So I'm going to get into that, but that's why I wanted to share this story with you now, because there is a disconnect between what we know in research and what's truly happening in classrooms. And if we want to change instructional practices, we have to build awareness and we have to build advocacy in people who might not consider themselves advocates, people who just don't know. We have to reach them in a different way. And it means going into the community. They're not going to necessarily go to you. So this is the document. It's called Can You See Me? And what you see right here is a little kitten looking in the mirror, and what the kitten sees back is a lion. And this little kitten started out as a cute little baby kitten, but every year of this little kitten's life that goes by, people saw this kitten, but they really didn't know what was going on. So they saw the kitten, but they didn't really see what was happening. So the whole line throughout my workbook is, can you see me? Yes, I see you. All these people in the community see this little kitten, but they're not understanding what is happening. So the workbook follows the evolution of this child that's falling through the cracks in plain sight. And there's this downward spiral happening. And I'm presenting an extreme case. Remember, this is a fictional account, but it's based on things that truly do happen. So not every child will have all these symptoms. This is an exaggeration, but I wanted to present something that could be used at a PTA meeting, a SEPTA meeting, and make it available for people to just download and use. And the only thing I ask is that the credit is given and it's not separated and it's kept as a PDF. Okay, so I start off in the workbook with the mother, right? And can you see me? Yes, I see you. And here the little kitten is in preschool. And what might the mother see? It took this child in some cases a long time to be able to speak. And only family members might understand this child. And sometimes the parents have to, interpret what's going on, because people will look at the child and say, I don't understand. And the parents will talk for that child. That happens often in the preschool years. And this child could be frustrated. This child might be the one throwing himself into walls because, there could be delayed speech, or the pronunciation is a problem and people aren't understanding. And this child might feel that people grow impatient, even though this child can't express himself. Through this workbook, I'm trying to get the message out that this is what people might see in a preschool child. And then here's the father, and perhaps the child feels that the child isn't listening. Perhaps the father is getting mad, thinking the child just doesn't listen. But what's really happening is the child might have a hard time following directions. That's sometimes a symptom that there could be a reading problem that will happen because there are language problems happening. The child might need, to slow down speech, and the parents aren't aware of this. And so the child is saying, in this document, but of course can't express this. So I'm that voice for the child saying, I know you would like me to be more like you. I wish I could run faster, play catch, and not fall over my own feet. I'm sorry that I make a mess with my food. Because what I hear from parents is sometimes, not always, that these are different things that happen that might not directly be reading related, but as many of you know, something like dyslexia doesn't happen in a bubble, that things happen together, and that there are different symptoms that occur, and there's comorbidity. So there might be ADHD, there might be other problems that are going on besides just speech and language. There could be sensory processing issues, even if it's not labeled that way. So I'm trying to make people aware of this. I'm trying to make a preschool teacher aware of this. They might see some of these things happening in preschool, where sometimes kids can't take loud noises, or they might be turned off to different things in a school setting. They might see that a child has a hard time picking up a crayon. Maybe you've seen this in your own children, that they had trouble using scissors or cutting or holding a pencil. They didn't like story time. They got up and walked around the room during story time instead of listened, because language was too much for them. These are all things that people don't realize that can manifest into a reading problem later on. So, these are the things I would like to bring attention to people. Many children go to daycare, and the daycare worker might have to help kids, even these older kids, with buttoning, zipping, tying their shoes much longer than expected. Sometimes these kids don't like tags in their clothes. Things feel itchy. They're annoyed by certain things. Again, not directly related to anything with reading, but it's not unusual for some kids to have sensory issues. And I've talked to many parents, and I'm not just pulling this out, where I've heard these things. And it seems to be sometimes, but not always, a sign. And so it's just something to pay attention to. These kids could be the fussy ones where they don't want their food touching, vegetables touching certain things on the plate. So these are just some things to keep in mind. And in the workbook, by the way, as I'm telling this story, I also have researched information, as well as other information like, did you know? And so it's balanced with a story and then information that you can share. I'm only sharing the different people in the community with what to look for with you tonight in a PowerPoint, but in the actual PDF that is on the ifonlybooks.com website, that you can download as this workbook. And in the workbook, you will see that it's balanced with a story and then information, factual information. But the story, hopefully, is what gets people to notice and could start that conversation in a very friendly way. That's what we want to do. We don't want to turn people off with a lot of edubabble. right? With a lot of lingo that's above their heads, where they feel intimidated. So I pride myself in being down to earth, saying it like it is. You know, I'm a kid from Brooklyn, you know, Jenny from the block. So that's how I like to approach people. Just, you know, just real talk. And I think that's what we have to start doing more of, really being approachable with people and not being afraid to get into communities that maybe we don't have that knowledge about, but when we show people we're approachable, it opens a conversation. So here's the pediatrician story. Again, can you see me? Yes, I see you. And of course, the pediatrician is the first person that really, you know, a parent looks to for information. And of course, pediatricians are like most of the other professionals in this literacy community. They don't know much either about reading, and they don't really understand the connection between language, speech, articulation, and reading. And I know as a parent, I didn't have these conversations, and I talk to parents now, and they really don't have these types of conversations. So I wanted to point out that a pediatrician needs to be involved. And in my If Only I Would Have Known book, book one, the first part of the parent book, starts off with a parent having a conversation with a pediatrician after her older two children have already struggled and she wants to do something differently for her youngest child. And now the pediatrician is enlightened. You know, this is in my fantasy world. So remember, it's fiction. But, you know, my hope is that pediatricians with very little time to start reading the research would be able to just pick the book up and get enough information to be able to start that conversation. So again, this is what the child is thinking perhaps in his head. If this child could express it, this is what this child would be saying. You know, I still have trouble talking. I mix up my words that sound alike. I can't seem to remember the words I want to say. You know, mommy wants to sit with me and read books, but it's so hard for me to follow a story. I just want to jump out of her arms. You know, because that's what I hear, that, you know, we kind of, in this society, we think that every kid will just sit for a long time and listen to a story. And some kids can, even kids with dyslexia, some of them love story time. But you have other kids with some severe language problems, and the language just sounds like Charlie Brown language to them. And it's not enjoyable. It's just too much. It's an overload of language. And as a matter of fact, a parent just called me last night, and I'm not kidding, just last night, a parent in a very high-performing district here on Long Island. Her son is 19 years old, struggled his whole school career with reading and special ed services, but he was able to get by because he also was very bright and charming, and he was able to keep his head above water, but he never really felt comfortable reading. He went to Boston College for 1 year, flunked miserably. And the parent just called me to see if I could help her 19-year-old son. And this is not unusual. And it was the psychiatrist who told her to contact me, because this was the same psychiatrist who worked with another one of my students who was a high school student who realized that he was going to go to Penn State University and couldn't read, and told his therapist that, I'm so nervous. I don't feel confident about reading. And I ended up working with this student a year before he went off to Penn State to try to help him. So we have these older kids that we cannot forget about. It's so important, that we try to catch them when they're young, but at the same time, not forget about these teenagers. And many of them are struggling with anxiety and depression and feeling like failures. So we have to really be aware of this. A pediatrician should be aware that rhyming, being able to hear rhymes is, it's a first step, even if being able to rhyme isn't directly correlated with phonemic awareness and being able to read. It's on a larger scale. It's still an important benchmark. And many of these kids have trouble hearing rhymes. They don't like to play listening games. They just don't know, and they just kind of wish that this would stop it, because it's just so hard for them to recall the first sound in a word or to play these games with alliteration. So pediatricians should know this. Teachers, of course, should know this. And unfortunately, across this country, we still have teachers using balanced literacy. And here's the child, and notice that this little kitty cat now is morphing into something that doesn't look quite the same at the beginning from how he looked at the beginning, and looks terrified and scared and just not feeling very confident. And here he is, substituting words, very common mistakes: when for then, for from, for the. And mommy and daddy are getting frustrated, right? And the kindergarten teacher is not aware and expecting these kids to remember sight words and things like that. And this message isn't getting out fast enough, and change isn't happening quickly enough. So again, the teacher is expecting this child to use the pictures, and the child is not able to keep up in these leveled books, and the signs are everywhere. It's just that many people aren't aware of the signs. It's not that they're looking to damage kids, they're unaware. And when they hear these things about the science of reading, it's not like they want to hurt children. I know that. It's that they just don't really believe that that's an issue that concerns them. So to give you a little background, in private practice, I would say most of the people who come to me, believe it or not, are educators. They are teachers, they are administrators, they are people that kind of know that this is what's out there. They were taught this way, and they know that they're not going to get satisfaction in school, and that they have to look outside the school system for tutoring. And only when their own kids struggle do they believe that something is very wrong. And again, it's not like I'm putting down teachers. I love teachers. I'm a teacher myself, first and foremost. But again, it's human nature to want to hold on to what you really believe in, how you were trained, and thinking that, well, it works for most kids, so it just must be something wrong with those kids, until it happens where they're in the position where they're using these strategies, these balanced literacy strategies, and it doesn't work, that they have that aha moment, like, you know what? I better look at this. And what I tell teachers is that, if you're coming to me, I will be happy to help you, but then you have to pay it forward. And the parents I work with become some of the most outspoken advocates out there. And that's what I always ask for. When I help your child, it's your job to share that, pay it forward. Right? So an OT is also really important. Why? Because a lot of children also have trouble holding a pencil. Again, people just don't know. The classroom teacher will see the child has handwriting problems. Sometimes the child is sitting with, his head on his arm, slumped over in the chair, leaning over the table, not being able to hold his own body up, kind of squinting and trying to figure this out. And, the OT is giving all sorts of hand exercises and trying to build core strength and working on grip. And, the OT really isn't aware how this is directly connected. This writing is directly connected to that whole language center. It's just not something that many are aware of. But I could tell you that at least 90%, probably closer to 95% of the students I've had have also had handwriting difficulties. That's something that's not known as well, but I put that in my book and I'm putting that here in this free document. Of course, we know SLPs are part of the picture too. So now this child is in first grade and still having trouble mixing up words. The child is having trouble following the teacher's directions. And the child might have all these great thoughts in his head, but can't get it down on paper. And so it's really hard for this child. And often dysgraphia isn't even something we talk about. We're always talking about dyslexia, but dysgraphia often goes along with dyslexia. And you will see these kids who not only have trouble holding a pencil and having trouble with handwriting, but they also have trouble with spelling. They also have trouble expressing themselves. And they have trouble with the whole processing issue, where they might have the thoughts up here, but they just can't get it down on paper. So SCI, now it could be a physical therapist because that's not unusual too. There could be an issue with balance, coordination, and here we go with another pullout. And when do these pullouts occur? Often during social studies and science. So now the child is missing academic subjects and has to constantly be back and forth, thrown, into the classroom, pulled out, and we expect this child to then be okay emotionally. It's very, very difficult for this child. So something that, physical therapists should be aware of is that this low muscle tone sometimes goes along with other problems too, that it's not just a physical problem. And you might see these kids sitting with their legs spread out in this W formation. So, these are all the people in this child's life who sees the child, but doesn't really see the child. And so parent groups need to be, well informed about what's happening. And so a lot of times parents are talking about homework and trying to keep up, and they're, looking for support, but they're frustrated. Parents are frustrated because it's like, they're looking for the right book. And that's kind of the myth. Like, if I just find the right books, my kids would be able to read. I'm sure some of you were told that, it's just that connection. If they just find books that they'll like, they'll become readers. Well, that's true if you can read. It's important to be able to make that connection. And sometimes older kids might feel like, oh yeah, I really want to learn to read now because this is something I want to learn about. But the bottom line is they have to be taught, right? So we have to get this message out to parent groups, because a lot of times these groups are just trying to give kids access to books. Remember that story with Mr. Lit? And other groups out there. Teach My Kid to Read. I was on the board of Teach My Kid to Read. And it was started by a woman whose own daughter struggled. And originally, Marion Waldman wanted to work with universities. And she was always up against a brick wall with the universities. And I said to her, we need to go through the parents. We need to get to the community. We need to have these community literacy solutions. I worked with Teach My Kid to Read for a few years. I recently left the board, but I still believe that parents are the ones that will be the drivers of change. I truly believe that. And they are. We see that now in every aspect of what we're seeing, that it's really the parent voices that need to be heard. So reading specialist, I was a reading specialist, and I started teaching with leveled books because that's what I was told kids needed, and to use the pictures. And then we wonder why kids can't move past the level C. Well, it's all those predictable books. And they might be taught phonics in one place, but they are in books that do not offer practice opportunities. So maybe they get phonics for a small part of the day, but they're not getting those practice opportunities. And so these kids just become guessers. And they're supposed to just memorize sight words and use pictures. And this child is so frustrated saying, I'm told to get my mouth ready and look at the picture, and does this make sense? But to this poor little kid, they just can't move beyond like level B, C, or D. Right? Okay, so now the nurse should be involved. Why the nurse, you might ask? Well, how many kids get up and want to go to the nurse? Often the kids who are struggling are in the nurse's office. They become really good friends with the nurse. And the nurse might think, oh, here we go again. Here's Johnny, here's Mary, and it's like, I have a stomach ache. They have this wrong. And, they're almost like pegged as like these hypochondriacs. There's always something wrong. And the nurse begins to just kind of look at like, yeah. And they send them back to the room. But the nurse needs to know that, hey, this is a sign that maybe something more is going on. So now the kid is older and things are not any better. And now they're expected to do silent reading and put little Post-it notes all over the book. The kid who struggles can't even write on the little Post-it notes because they have trouble, and they don't even know the right questions to ask. And they really haven't read the book, but they're pretend reading, which happens often. And then the kid is thought of as lazy, and the teacher thinks this kid is lazy and sees the kid holding a book upside down. And at this point, it's just unbearable for this child. So again, this is my little fantasy, and it's a story, but it's not so far from what really does happen. Remember, these, whatever I write is taken from multiple encounters with parents across the board at all ages. I talk to parents with young children, And like I said, I just spoke to someone with a 19-year-old. These problems just don't go away easily. So a psychologist needs to be aware of this, and that, when they do these types of evaluations, often they're just looking to see if a child needs services or not, but they need to know truly what to look for. And I've seen kids who were evaluated by the school, but they weren't severe enough, so that we're missing these kids who aren't low enough. So we have to make sure that people who are doing the evaluating really know what to look for. And that there are so many signs here, and not to ignore this, and not to think, well, it's not severe enough to give this kid help. No, this person needs to be involved too. And it really needs to start at tier 1, because parents, you're doing this year after year. If you get a parent advocate or an attorney, it doesn't stop there. You know that year after year, you are always checking and seeing, well, which teacher am I going to get? Will this teacher know what the other teacher knew? Will this teacher be highly trained? Will they follow my IEP? Will they follow the goals? Do they know how to write measurable goals? This becomes, something you didn't bargain for, where you are an advocate year after year. But that's why I think we can't just look at this kid by kid. We have to look at changing a system from the bottom up in tier 1. But that takes, I believe, community involvement. One parent at a time, or a few parents at a time, it's easy to write them off. It's not easy to write off larger groups, right? To become the squeaky wheel needs to be really engaging many more people. So now the other children are in understanding. So now this child is in 4th grade, right? And now this child is embarrassed. The other kids are recognizing that if this kid has to read out loud, that, this kid is mixing up words. And, I've heard of cases where the teacher would rip up a paper in front of the other kids, and it's humiliating. And nobody wants to be friends with a dumb kid. And now you see this little kitty cat is changing and really getting angry with himself and with others. And, this is where it starts to really change. And we call this that 4th grade slump. Some of you know of that term, because now instead of learning to read, it's all about reading to learn. And it's just expected by this point that kids will just know. And if kids don't know by this point, they think there's something wrong with them. And other kids really start to see the difference too. So in this document, I mentioned a bus driver. So why a bus driver? Well, often this kid is the one who doesn't want to get on the bus, right? Or is sitting there looking miserable. So after a whole day of school, just sitting there wanting to go to sleep and just hide, right? Just he's so exhausted because it's so emotionally draining. Well, maybe the bus driver needs to know a little bit about this too, so that they could start recognizing what kids look like sitting on the bus and getting off the bus. As I mentioned to you, in my If Only I Would Have Known book, it starts off with a pediatrician, it moves on to preschool teachers, and then it moves on. The 3rd book is about the librarian, because I really do feel librarians, community librarians, as well as school librarians, are not educated in this area, and they need to know. So my daughter happens to be a librarian. She works in a community library, and she works as a young adult librarian. But I could assure you that most librarians do not know. They believe that if you just match the right books to the kid, that they will have this love of reading. And, the books they have available are mostly level books if they are aligned with the school district. So Teach My Kid to Read is an organization that is trying to change that and to get decodable books available in libraries. And I'm proud to say I'm a consultant with the Lynbrook School District here on Long Island, and I'm working with them to change their instruction. And this is coming from the community. Now, parents want to have access to these decodable books over the summer. So guess what? The library is responding because there's a need, because we're changing instruction in the school district. And so it becomes a snowball effect, right? The more people know, they can ask for things. And it's not just one person asking, they've had multiple requests. So now this summer, there will be decodable books that align with what the kindergarten and first grade teachers are using in their classrooms, that align with the program that they're using. So, this was my dream, to actually see this start happening. And another piece to the puzzle is we brought this initiative down to the pre-K. So there is a universal pre-K in Lynbrook, and I started to go into the universal pre-K, and the district is using their funds and giving some of their funds to support my work with that UPK. Because they feel it's so important to have that vertical alignment, starting with pre-K, going into K1 and 2 and all the way up. And now we're getting the libraries to be involved, any library that works with Lynbrook, but starting with the Lynbrook Library. So the assistive technology person should also know. And here's something that we expect kids to do, that they should just be able to start using a keyboard. But they need to be taught to use both hands if they're going to be handing in reports, because it's no faster to type something with one finger than it is to do something that's handwritten in the earlier grades. So instead of really teaching kids to improve their handwriting, we're putting kids on computer programs very early on, giving them these accommodations very early, and they need accommodations, don't get me wrong, but we're giving them these accommodations and not spending enough time on handwriting. And so these kids are left having to keep up, and they still can't, right? Because they have to learn how to truly type in order to make this effective. Principals need to be on board. So the district that I'm working with now, the principals are fabulous, but that comes from the top. And that was from the superintendent and the assistant superintendent. And the assistant superintendent got interested in this because, again, his own child was struggling as well. And so it starts at the top, and the principals are key, because everything is about leadership in schools. And if kids are making these mistakes, and they have to write and they have to read, and the principal doesn't understand what's going on here, somehow the parents get blamed for this, that it's poor parenting. So kids are being sent to the principal's office and the principal doesn't get it. Guidance counselors. So my friend Trey, who I mentioned earlier, he's a counselor, guidance counselor. He has a sound chart in his office, and he started to give quick little assessments to see if kids could read, right? He wants to know if they know their sounds, if they have any type of reading issues, because often these kids are being sent to the guidance counselor and, you know, they just don't know. They're getting in trouble. These kids, now notice, it's not a kitty cat anymore. This is a lion. Can you see me? Yes, I see you. But still not knowing what's going on. And so the English teacher caught the kid drifting off, you know, is being sent out of the room. And at this point, this child just wants to let out the F-bomb, right? And just tell everybody to go, you know what. So this is happening. And I mentioned the custodian. You know why? These kids are wandering around hallways sometimes. They're the ones hanging out in bathrooms or wandering around hallways. And they see these kids often, and maybe they could, you know, flag these kids as well. Everybody has a piece in this. As I mentioned to you before, the barber meets kids, the minister, anybody in churches and synagogues. You know, we have to start getting people aware of what's going on. So now this child is in 9th grade. Maybe the barber's recognizing that the kid is using drugs. The barber is a big part of the community. In a Black community, I could tell you many times that's, you know, a central person in the Black community, the barbers. And I learned that from talking and getting involved in the community, all right? And this particular barber wants to make a difference. He himself struggled, his child struggled, and guess what? He started to help his own child and started to turn things around for his son. So they could certainly be members of the community talking up. Social workers, right? We need to get them involved, and knowing that it could be an academic problem, not just behavior problems. And now the child is in 10th grade and moving along, and unfortunately, too late. Right? Now we see this child is being sent away from, you know, doing drugs, involved in bad things, lie after lie. And this child often just wants to die. Like, you know, it happens where the child is not being heard and has all these types of problems. And, you know, I have these did you know pages dispersed throughout the document, like these little pieces that people need to know that students with learning disabilities like dyslexia have 3 times a higher risk of attempting suicide. This is really, you know, a life and death issue. And, you know, I wrote a blog about this, dying to read and write, and it's so important. And the outcome is it takes a village. And I would hope that this document could be used at meetings to help facilitate change, and that there's a commitment at the end of the document that people will write down what they'll do. What is their role in the community? What can they do? It doesn't matter if you're a barber or a shopkeeper. It doesn't matter if you're highly educated or you dropped out. Everybody could have a role in this. And so I have a space like what you'll do after a month or 3 months or 6 months or a year, so that people stick to this. There needs to be accountability. a lot of times there's just talk and no action. So the document brings people back. It helps, like, okay, we started the conversation. Now, hopefully, we'll have a book club, right? We'll talk about it. We'll use If Only I Would Have Known. We'll use the Can You See Me to gain some awareness, raising awareness, and working with community organizations. As I mentioned before, the website is ifonlybooks.com. You look under free resources, and hopefully the next step would be to organize a book club discussion using the book. And this way, the discussion guide provides questions to help facilitate conversations about early literacy and language development, literacy instruction, dyslexia, and intervention for struggling readers. And on this website, I also posted the YouTube videos of Trey and his Lit Champs group with the men all talking about this. He did this book club in 3 sessions for book 1, book 2, book 3. That's how the book was broken up into, with the pediatrician, the preschool teacher, and the librarian. And you see everyone growing and getting more confident about what they could talk about. So, this is my book. I'm open for questions now. I'm going to stop the share, and I hope that was helpful.
That was very helpful. Just so you know, people right away were like, thank you for hosting this webinar. Thank you for inviting Faith. Can you clone Faith 4 million times? So, just so you know, people are very excited.
Thank you.
That was really neat to hear. I like the approach of working with the parents and the community rather than from the top down. I think it's a really powerful approach.
Yeah, I just think that if we wait for people to seek out organizations, we're missing the opportunity to reach a lot of people who don't have access or just don't know. And I do think we have to make a concerted effort to reach out to them. Yeah. And my book, by the way, is in Spanish too. And so this is for everybody to be able to communicate. And I think that's important. And that came out of speaking to parents. Oh, is there a Spanish edition? And there wasn't. And so I'm hoping to get that message out there. So maybe you could put that in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. Do you know if there's any existing book clubs or study groups that are currently happening or are going to be ongoing this summer?
So I actually just spoke to a parent recently who is involved. Her name is Vasia Hawkins, and she is involved with different parent groups, and I'm hoping that I'm going to start working with them. I actually just met them last week on a Zoom, and she's on Twitter, and she and I have communicated. So I'll let you know if some of this is going to be happening again. But like I said, it happened in Norristown, Pennsylvania. I know that in Monticello, New York, the books were given out in the folders for the kindergarten screening. So Jane Sorensen, she works for EPIC. That's an organization in Monticello. She works with the Monticello School District in New York. She worked with them to be able to get the book available so that when parents would go for kindergarten screening, they would get this in their folder. But I don't think it was done in a book club format. But I would like that to be the next step, because I don't know what happens after the book goes home. Are people really reading it? Do they, it's so much better when you have these conversations around a book to make sure that people truly understand and they don't feel embarrassed that it's happening with other people, and they could ask outside of the school. You know, I think that's important.
So we had one of our members asked basically, how do we help districts navigate all the different various curriculum choices, especially if they're not aligned with the science of reading?
Yeah, that is a problem, because there are people who are very vocal out there. That's part of what I'm seeing now. I'm on Twitter, and it gets kind of contentious that people have a vested interest in what they want out there. And what I'm noticing is it's on both sides of the aisle. I hate to say it, but you know, I say it like it is. And it's not just the balanced literacy people. There are people under this SOR umbrella, and they might not be sharing correct information either. And they might think that it is, or they might have their own ideas. So it's really hard to get the right information out there. And like I said, just handing people a fact sheet. You know, I know that's what's happening now, where there's this movement of getting pediatricians to have fact sheets in their offices. Guess what? Some of those people can't read the fact sheets, and they're not picking up the fact sheets. It's not friendly enough for them. They need people talking to them. They need hand-holding. As a coach, I realized how important it is to handhold, because even teachers need hand-holding. When years ago, when Foundations was put into every classroom, teachers didn't even want to open the box themselves. I wrote about that in Failing Students of Failing Schools, that I had to take the shrink wrap off with them because they were scared to death of the box. People are afraid of change. So we have to make this friendlier. That's my advice. We have to make this friendlier and more approachable.
Right. So how can here's another quick question. How can families tell the difference between what is that developmental stage of early childhood development and what are the indicators of a reading disability? So I was thinking like early childhood, those, birth through 4 or 5 years old, and what is outside the norm versus what is more of an indicator of a learning challenge or a language-based learning disability.
Well, truthfully, a lot of this presents the same way. Early on, it presents the same way, and it's remedied the same way. Okay, so that's really important to know, that you can't go wrong if you start looking at kids and start becoming aware of different things, because early intervention is best. So I'm not big on labels. I'm really not. I know that that's part of the conversation, and it does help kids feel better when there's a label attached, such as dyslexia. But truthfully, I am a teacher first, and I'm all about instruction and intervention. And so I don't think you need a label right away in order to be able to recognize deficit areas and be able to work with those areas. I don't know if I answered the question, but my feeling is start looking early, start becoming aware early, and you can't go wrong by starting to give kids more practice in these foundational areas of concern.
All right. At one point during the presentation, you had talked about, and as many of us know, in terms of the public school system, there's a lot of related services and specialists basically accessing the children, but so they may be missing like their science or their social study.
Correct.
In your professional experiences, do you have like an ideal or what is an approach or schedule that works well for children who might need all those different levels of service?
Yeah, so there are different models. I worked in a middle school, a fifth and sixth grade school, where we actually had an intervention period built into the schedule. And those kids that did not need to go to intervention, whether it was to AIS or resource room or speech or whatever they needed, those kids would either stay in the room with the teacher and get review, or they would get enrichment. So there was no new information at that time. And I do believe that that is an important model, whether it's, whatever you call it, there should be a period where kids don't feel like they are missing something important. Because as you know, social studies and science is that content area, vocabulary, and background knowledge. And I know the big move now is to get a certain content-rich curriculum, but hey, let's go back to social studies and science. That has been marginalized in elementary school. That's one of the first things to go. And, that's so important. We have to start looking at that rather than jumping to the next best thing. We need to kind of look at what the schedule is telling us and have a period built into the day that addresses those needs. That's, my opinion.
One of our listeners, watchers, obviously had a question, but did you had a favored curricula, or do you write your own lesson plans, that kind of thing? So it was a specific question about that.
Okay, so I think that it's not just an isolated issue. There is no one perfect program. Let's get this straight. I don't care what it is. There is no one perfect program. And that's why we need highly knowledgeable teachers and administrators who are the decision makers here, because teachers are victims of that, right? We're doing what we're told, but those decision makers really need to be knowledgeable. So I can tell you what I know is important. K1 and 2, we need a really strong phonics program. Really strong phonics program with lots of practice opportunities. Not just a phonics program that is presented at one point in the day and then the rest of the day we do all these other things unrelated. There needs to be a coordinated effort that the phonics is practiced in decodable books in those early grades. And then we're, throughout the day, we're using some of these strategies and word building skills in content area, using ways to address words that maybe they're having trouble with, multi-syllable words, using these same strategies that go through the day. Having kids learn, meaningful word parts, prefixes, suffixes. This should be built in. And content knowledge is really important, as well as well-taught reading strategies. And when I say well-taught, a lot of people are poo-pooing reading strategies now. Oh, we've done that with guided reading and it doesn't work. No, well, that didn't work because most teachers just ask kids a bunch of questions like, what's the main idea? That is not teaching how to figure out the main idea, asking what is the main idea. They have to have a strategy to learn to find main idea. They have to learn how to summarize, not just say, well, can you summarize and write a summary now? There's a difference between questioning and teaching strategies correctly. That's not happening in the schools. So there's a lot of misinformation, and some of this is being, how do I say it, put out there by people, well-meaning people, and some of them in the science of reading community saying, reading strategies aren't so, important. It's really this content-rich curriculum that's so important. And I'm like, no, you need both. You need really top-notch reading strategies and writing strategies being taught, as well as building knowledge, whether it's through a particular, program, or it's through your social studies and science blocks. I don't care where it's taught, but you need this coordinated. So in answer to the question, I'm not going to say there's a perfect program. I can't say what's my favorite. I can say years ago, Open Court was an excellent program. Nobody talks about Open Court anymore, but that certainly did a very good job of putting phonics at the forefront, and building some nice literature as well into the day. I like that. But right now I'm using Sounds Right in this particular district where I'm a consultant. But again, I'm not here to push a program. That happens to be speech to print, which I happen to feel is a nice, efficient way of approaching this. But again, I don't want to go off on a tangent, because anything that's Orton Gillingham based is certainly well established as working for many kids. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than a speech to print approach, but there's not one perfect program. We need to look at everything, and we need knowledgeable people out there so that we could pivot. When it's time to pivot, we have to know how.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming and speaking with us all. And we just really want to say thank you. It was fabulous.
Thank you.
Your enthusiasm is so contagious. And
thank you. Well, I hope people will go to the website. I hope we could get my book into pediatricians' offices and preschool teachers reading it, and libraries keeping it available for conversations. And I hope people tune into my podcast, The Literacy View. So I'm going to promote that as well, because I do think it's a no BS zone. And that's what I pride myself on, that, it's straight talk, and we don't shy away from those difficult points. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
thank you so much. It was great having you here and sharing your knowledge and sharing your time with us this evening. We appreciate it. I thought we were fine. Okay.
Thank you.
I want to take a minute and just let everybody know that our next Read for Parents is going to be on August 9th at 7 o'clock, and it's going to be phonological awareness with our special guest speaker, Lucy Hart Paulson. So put that on your calendars. It should be a great evening. Also, we want people to save the date for our annual conference. It will be October 26th and 27th. It's going to be virtual again this year, and the title is Unraveling the Strands, Digging Deeper into the Science of Reading. So we're going to unravel those and give a little bit of information, or a lot of information, about all the different strands. So hope you can join us the end of October. Right. And once again, thank you, Faith, and the people that were able to join us this evening. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.